My faith's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been tested a few times, and probably this time was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I have my faith, I have my wife, I have my other son, all through God. And that's living testimony right there.
All right, welcome everyone to our 60th podcast.
60?
I know, I can't believe
Man.
it. Can't even say it. We were just at 50. This is our last podcast on small groups, and that'll sum up the series. We have another, before I tell you about that, I should probably tell you who's here. So with us today is Senior Pastor Paul Gruenberg, and we have guest speaker Sharon Greenhoe, our small group leader, get her done person. What did you say you were
I'm a hunter and a gatherer.
Hunter and gatherer. I like that. We have one last testimony, personal testimony to listen to. And I'll let Pastor Paul cue up that for us.
So one of the aspects of small groups is just coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And we discussed last week how Noel and his wife are going to begin a pinochle small group. I'm going to start a horseshoe small group to be invitational to people who just love to play horseshoes so that we can get to know people a little bit better. But sometimes life takes a turn and it gets really, really difficult. And in this particular small group, we're dealing with grief. We're dealing with the loss of a loved one, and sometimes walking with grief in your life, it becomes really, really important that you have people who are or have walked through the same thing to lean against or lean on for support. And this group, this particular small group, Brian is going to talk about, deals with that very subject. Let's listen to Brian together.
Well, about 8 years ago, our son come down with a real rare form of cancer. And we went from hospital to hospital. 22 months later, we found out that hospice would have to be called in. There was nothing more they could do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was rough on my wife, myself, and Eric's brother, Kevin.
Yeah.
And he's still having a very hard time. We all are.
Sure.
So
So at that time, there wasn't a small group for people in your situation. I think that's what you had told
Right.
us. So tell us how.
Well, during the course
Yeah.
of, after Eric passed away, it had been a few years, and we had Pastor Dan at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and talking to him, he found out that there was a program, complete with a video, Beyond the Broken Heart,
Mm-hmm.
it was an 8-week course that could walk us through.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, boy, that'd be great. I wonder how many people would be interested within the church.
Mm-hmm.
We found out there was a response,
Mm-hmm.
but then of all things, COVID-19 hit, and that pretty much shut everything down.
Mm-hmm.
During the course of that, Pastor Dan transferred out,
Mm-hmm.
and Pastor Paul come in. And Pastor Paul gave me a call. He goes, Brian, think we can get this going? I said, well, I'd like to if you would. I says,
Mhm.
but I would like to be co-teaching it. I says, I'm not the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Dan says, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, like I say, people within the church that says, boy, if you can get this off the ground, we'd like to attend. And so we've had up towards 8 people.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't understand what has happened to all of us. If you Google it, they'll say situations similar to ours. You just joined a group that you never wanted to belong to,
Yeah.
meaning the loss of your loved one.
Sure.
But then within that group, we formed our group in the church. While we don't understand why what has happened to us, all of us, we do understand we have our God, we have our faith. He's here for us. Let's be here for them.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about like how long it took you to get through the book, and then what happened after you finished the study.
Well, it took 8 weeks, and I have a friend over in Boyne City that he's in a similar situation. He lost his wife quite a few years ago, and he says, Brian, whatever you do, when that course runs its course, don't just say that's it.
Mm-hmm.
He says, even if you just go out to lunch, he says, continue to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we have done. We used to meet once a week. Now we meet once a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that to be so beneficial. We'll go around the table, me being the embassy, and say, what's everybody done in the last month? And everybody can relate. And if you wait long enough, and usually it isn't that long,
Mm-hmm.
they can relate to the loss of their loved one.
Yeah.
And it brings us back together. When we first met, there was a lot of tears, including me.
Mm-hmm.
There's still tears, including me, but there's also laughter. We're doing okay.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I think the powerful thing about what you just told us is that there really wasn't a small group there was a need for a small group, but there wasn't one available.
Yes.
And so between conversations, it was created. So maybe people have a thought for something and they find out there's a lot of people that need the same
Yeah.
group.
well, people within the group have asked me, is it all right if we call so-and-so and ask if it's okay if she attends?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You bet. And like I say, well, I think it's been good therapy for the group. It's been good therapy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Very good therapy. And maybe that's God's way of talking to me. Because it's, like I say, it's been beneficial.
Yeah. So you got together after COVID. So do you remember what month and year that was? Because I'm having a hard time remembering myself.
It's been in the last 12 months.
Okay.
So I'll say 3 months ago, we went to once a month. So there's a few breaks in there. One time we didn't meet at all. Everybody had too many things going for themselves, and he says, well, let's just postpone it.
Sure.
But we won't give it up. We found out it's too valuable for us.
So your small group is very flexible to its needs.
Yes,
So
it is.
I think
It
that's
is.
important as well.
And when we meet, well, like last time, for example, the idea was somebody within the group says, everybody, please bring a picture of your loved one.
That's wonderful.
And it was hard, but you're right, Dana. It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. So how was belonging to this small group? How do you think this has impacted your walk with Christ? And I know I kind of throwing this out
that's
as a
okay.
curveball, but does anything come to mind?
It's a hard one.
Yeah.
My faith's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been tested a few times, and probably this time was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I have my faith. I have my wife. I have my other son, all through God. And that's living testimony right there. In fact, Kevin, one time, he had a hard time and with his belief. And I didn't even remember this story till he said it to me. We were in Canada canoeing along, and I said to Kevin, just out of the blue, I says, how can a person not believe in God when all you have to do is look around you? Fast forward to today, Kevin says to me, he says, Dad, when you said that, he says, I have never, ever forgotten that. He says, thank you for those words. So,
That's just beautiful. Tell us a little bit about you were sharing that your son doesn't have the resource that you have here or have created here. So tell us a little bit about that.
okay, he may have it down there, but he's in Ann Arbor,
Mm-hmm.
very large city. He's in between jobs. He just landed a new job. He's closing on his house the 13th of September.
Oh my gosh.
He's in between girlfriends. And so he's had a lot going.
Sure.
And come fall, he would like to find a group similar to ours, a small group where once he's got all his ducks in a row, so to speak, he can get back on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
He misses his brother dearly. And he wants what his mother and I have up here to lead him back to Christ and understand his loss,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that life moves on.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you.
And thank you again.
Thank you very much.
So one of the powerful things about a small group is when you go through difficulties in life, you've got that support. You've got people who have either been there or are sharing the same experiences you're sharing now. And you can lean on each other. And grief groups, with the people that were meeting, many of them had been to some form of a grief group, but somehow in this session, this small group, the material that we covered, it was really powerful for them. And I was honored to be a part of that with Brian and to realize that some of the hardest things we do in life are living through loss. And unfortunately, we oftentimes live through it alone, and we become more lonely, more detached, and it's easy to do. And now with this particular group, they are not so alone. They've got people who can support them. They get together, like he said, once a month. I get an email once a month reminding me about the group, and oftentimes I can't go, and sometimes I'm able to, and to talk with the people who are there. But it's a very powerful, really important small group to have. People who are without faith, I've watched this at funerals, they grieve harder because there's no hope of ever seeing your loved one again. And I know that everyone in the group, as we went through it, they had a level of faith that said to them, my loved one's gone, but there will be another day when we will be together again. And so we need those reminders. We need to be in community with one another through those difficult moments in life.
Mm-hmm.
I was reminded too that grief doesn't have a start and end date.
No, it doesn't.
And, it revisits us over and over when we least expect it, and in different ways. There's different levels of grief. And so it's cyclical. It comes and it goes. So I think that's really important for people to remember that just because it's been a year, people don't just get over it and move on. That's not the way life is. It's not the way grief lives. And the other thing I was thinking about, even though they've been through that study, with adult learning, we have to hear things 2 or 3 times. So even going back through the same study again, people very possibly can hear something different than what they're at a different stage than they were before. So I think repeating a study is wonderful. If it was that good, do it again. I encourage them. And I just applaud Brian for stepping up and doing this, because when you're grieving yourself, or if you're going through any kind of loss or suffering yourself, to be a leader, to bring other people along, to do that it takes a lot of heart. There was one other thing. Oh, the little thing that he said to his son about how can there not be a God when you're out in nature like that? You never know who's watching you, who's listening to you, and whose life you're going to touch or how. So that was a very powerful testimony.
Yeah. I mean, it was very evident that Brian has a tremendous amount of faith. And just how he merely mentioned, how can you look around and not believe in God? It touched his son in a way that was needed right at that moment. So I think that's so powerful. But
he was a hard act to follow.
Oh, well, one thing we touch on as a result of this particular testimony is that small groups can form around many different things, many different themes. We've heard from Barb how there's a craft group, and we've heard how there's men's groups and ladies groups. You can have a group surrounding parents with little ones, or singles, or just marrieds. You can have groups that are interested in studying the Bible in 1 year, and you can have groups that are interested in specific studies. There are so many different ways to do groups, and we're adding groups that are just going to look to have fun together, like horseshoes and pinochle.
And Diners Club, we get to eat.
And there's Diners Club. Yes, oftentimes at Methodist small groups, there's food.
Most times.
Most times. But the idea being that it's coming together to be together, to walk through life together.
Yeah, and I think if it's laid upon your mind for a certain group that you need, there is certainly someone else that has that very same need. So if you're not hearing what you're looking for, just bring it up.
Call Sharon,
Yes, and also they can just go to editor,
FUMC editor.
editor, and send a message, and it'll get to me.
All right. Well, that wraps up our series on small groups. We sure appreciate everyone's time for listening, and we've heard some extremely powerful testimonies, and we just appreciate all those people that have shared their testimonies with us.
Dana, one more thing.
Yes.
If you listen to a podcast, any of our almost 60 podcasts now, if you listen to one and you found it to be moving in your life, or there was something that struck you, I would encourage you to share that podcast with others who you may think needs to hear something from a different voice other than your own, or just a way of just sharing your faith by sharing the podcast that you listen to.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because we are always looking for input on, what topics do you want to hear about? And oftentimes it's a little tough to get that information. So by sharing, that would be a great way to not only help other people, but help us to get you things that we can talk about, things you want to hear about. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for your time. We are located at First United Methodist Church in Gaylord, Michigan, 215 South Center Street. If you want to visit us in person, we have a 9 a.m. traditional service and a 10:45 contemporary service. And if you can't make it in person, you can listen to us on Facebook, YouTube, or on the radio at 101.5. Thanks everyone for joining.